We study individuals of the past to learn lessons about ourselves and who we are. The life of Julius Caesar teaches us about our shared desires for wealth, fame, and above all, power. His life also teaches about what power does to us. Julius Caesar's life was all about gaining and keeping power, but for Caesar, there was never enough. He always wanted more, and he let nothing stand in his way in his quest for it. Caesar's addiction to power led to one of the most dramatic scenes in all of history. It led to his bloody murder by people he trusted. The assassination of Julius Caesar was on March 15th, 44 BCE, a date known as the Ides of March. This quick lecture is about the rise and fall of Julius Caesar and about what power does to us all. Now, we've talked about power, but maybe a nicer way to phrase it is that Caesar had ambition. Caesar had ambition in buckets. No, bucket loaders. He wanted greatness. We all have ambition. We all dream of being great. However, what are you willing to risk to achieve greatness? Some risk very little. Others, like Caesar, risked it all. What are you willing to risk to achieve greatness? Yes, you, the person listening. What will you do to be great? What will you sacrifice for your ambitions? Again, that answer varies with each person. Caesar wanted to rule the city of Rome and thus the world as he knew it. The problem was, there were already people in charge of Rome. In Caesar's time, Rome was ruled by a senate and had been for hundreds of years. The senate was 300 of the wealthiest men in Rome, chosen by other wealthy men. Technically, Rome was a republic. It was ruled by law and by these 300 older gentlemen. The problem was, though, that in Caesar's day, they ruled poorly. Not unlike some politicians of today, many Roman senators were simply interested in using their positions to enrich themselves. While the city of Rome was suffering from massive unemployment, starving citizens, disease, and infrastructure problems, many of these gentlemen were more concerned about the number of slaves that they owned, or purchasing another summer mansion. For better or worse, though, the Senate represented the rule of law and the people of Rome. Now, Julius Caesar was one of these senators, but he was also a general in the Roman army. Caesar saw that the people of Rome were suffering under the rule of the Senate. Perhaps he wanted to help the people by giving them a government that would serve them and not just use them. More likely, Caesar saw the misery of the Roman people as a way that he could make himself dictator. A dictatorship, or totalitarian government, is a government that is ruled by one man and is a more efficient government. Decisions are made quickly, and who better to make the decisions than the most ambitious man in Rome, Caesar. So the sides of the conflict were set. On one side was Julius Caesar, a man who would stop at nothing for power. On the other side, the Senate of Rome, who wanted to keep the republic, which kept them in charge of Rome, ruling poorly. Now the Senate knew of Caesar's ambition. They also noticed that Caesar was becoming more and more popular among the Roman people. Caesar was starting to make his move. Caesar used his wealth and his alliances to put on free gladiatorial games, circuses, and other entertainments for the people. The Senate decided that Caesar was becoming really annoying, and most definitely too popular and powerful among the Roman mobs. So, they sent him packing. The Senate ordered Caesar to Gaul, which is today modern-day France. Now, Gaul is here. Rome is here. Not only is that far from Rome, but at this time, Gaul was not even Roman territory. In Gaul lived many different large and warlike tribes of Celts. Some of them fought with little armor. Very, very little armor, or even clothing. This was to frighten their enemies, and indeed this frightens me. So Caesar was ordered to go to the middle of nowhere to battle with a vicious, naked enemy. The Senate thought that this was the perfect solution. Caesar would most likely be forgotten as he slogged his way in the dark forests of Gaul, battling the naked barbarians. With luck, his head would end up on the end of a pointy stick. Ha ha ha! Bye-bye, Caesar. Bye-bye. But apparently no one told Caesar that he was supposed to die, and at the least, be forgotten. As ordered, Caesar took his legions to Gaul. It took him 10 years, but using a policy of divide and conquer, Caesar one by one conquered the fierce Gallic tribes. Apparently he was not afraid of naked axe-wielding screaming barbarians as I am. Caesar staged one brilliant victory after another over the Gauls. He sent a constant stream of reports back to Rome about these victories and about his adventures, the adventures of Caesar. These reports that Caesar sent to Rome were full of exaggerations, painting Caesar as an incredibly heroic figure. Caesar was indeed one of the most brilliant generals of all time, but his reports made him out to be a god of war. Rather than be forgotten, Caesar's 10-year conquest of Gaul and his constant propaganda made him greater than ever in the eyes of the Roman people. The Senate's reaction to all of this? Crap. After conquering Gaul, a terrified Senate ordered Caesar to return to Rome without his armies. There, the Senate probably would have arranged an, quote, accident, unquote, for Caesar. But once more, Caesar outmaneuvered them and returned to Rome with his legions. Surrounded by his armies, the people of Rome gleefully celebrated Caesar's return, and he pronounced himself dictator of Rome. Many senators had already fled Rome and raised their own armies and legions to stop Caesar and save the Republic. Caesar tracked the senatorial forces down and defeated the Senate. In the process, Caesar's armies conquered Egypt. Caesar's returned to Rome, still an immense hero in the people's eyes. Here he pronounced to all his most famous quote, and this is also the tattoo I have on my left forearm. Veni, vidi, vici. Translation: I came, I saw, I conquered. So Caesar had done it. He was the one and only ruler of Rome. He had realized his ambition to be the first man in Rome. Rather than slaughtering and killing all those in the Senate who had opposed and fought against them, Caesar forgave them. What a guy! At the same time, he insisted to the Senate and to the people of Rome that once Rome was put right, he would hand power back over to the Senate. Caesar insisted that Rome was a republic and would forever remain so, except for this itty little bit of time while Caesar the dictator cleaned some things up. Sounds not so bad, right? Right? Well, the defeated Senate wasn't so sure. But who cares about those boring old senators? Caesar was now in charge, and he got right to work. Remember, Rome had huge problems with unemployment and a crumbling infrastructure? Caesar got things done. For the unemployed, Caesar started a public works program. Construction began immediately on roads, temples, aqueducts, bathhouses. Infrastructure improvements provided jobs and made the people's lives better. For the hungry, Caesar made sure the grain ships flowed to Rome and free bread was provided to the needy. And if your belly was full, Caesar also provided free games and entertainment to make the people happy. Roads, sanitation, sewage, clean drinking water, and military victory. These were the gifts of Julius Caesar, and the people loved him. Well, not all the people. Not exactly all of them. Remember the Senate? Well, they were still pretty upset. Caesar had taken the Republic and their power. One senator in particular really had mixed feelings about Julius Caesar. His name was Marcus Junius Brutus. Brutus had fought against Caesar when he had returned from Gaul, but Caesar had forgiven him, and the two were known to be close. Some said Caesar treated Brutus like a son, and Brutus indeed did seem to love Caesar. But he loved freedom and liberty as well. Now Caesar had promised over and over again that he would eventually return power to the Senate, but his actions spoke of another plan. While Caesar was improving the city of Rome, Caesar was also doing other things to increase his power. For instance, Caesar had taken all the power from the Senate and was declared dictator for life. He also started to wear red boots and purple robes. Red boots were traditionally worn by ancient kings, and purple was the color of Eastern royalty. Caesar claimed he just liked the colors. Then there were the new coins. The coins had Caesar's image on them. It was the first time a living Roman had appeared on the money, on the coinage. And to make it worse, the inscription on the coin was Dictata Perpetuo, dictator forever. Then there were the statues. Everywhere statues of Caesar were being erected. Caesar's image was everywhere, on coins, in the streets. You couldn't escape him. Finally, Caesar had authored a law which would make him a living god. Now Caesar assured the Senate that he had scrapped this idea of a law making him a god, and that his supporters had put him up to it. But there it was. On paper, Caesar, a god. And once a god, who can question the actions of a god? So if you're Brutus, what do? You love Caesar. Not only has he turned the Senate into a tree ornament, but he seems to be on the verge of becoming a monster that cannot be stopped. Is Caesar a hero? Or is he a tyrant? Poor Brutus. Caesar was his friend. He loved Caesar. But Caesar was drunk on power, and Brutus knew what power did to people, especially unlimited power. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Brutus did not say this quote, but it is a truth about human beings. If you give us power, we tend to abuse it unless safeguards are put into place. Caesar not only had power, he had near unlimited power. Sure, Caesar was doing great things for Rome today, but what would happen when he had the authority of a god? Therefore, when Caesar came to speak to the Senate of Rome on March 15th, 44 BCE, Brutus, along with a handful of senators, took down the great man the only way they knew possible. On the morning of March 15th, Caesar had felt unwell. He'll feel worse by the afternoon. As Caesar made his way to speak before the Senate, Brutus and his fellow conspirators attacked Caesar. They stabbed him over 20 times, and Caesar fought them off as best he could. But when Brutus stepped forward, Caesar stopped the struggle. Here was Brutus, a man he had loved as a son. Brutus took his knife and plunged it into Caesar's groin. As Caesar collapsed in a pool of blood, so ended the life of Julius Caesar, the great man. A man who risked it all for his ambition for power and glory, and in the end was assassinated by those who were closest to him. So who is the hero and who is the villain in this story? Unlike Disney tales, it's hard to know. But know one truth from this story. Power does corrupt, and thus those who we entrust with power must always be watched themselves, lest they abuse it.